At the end of week 4, I'm finding that your discussion board postings are really quite good and going in the direction that I'd hoped that they would. Actually, they're sort of exceeding my expectations in some ways. Most of the postings I have found to include a high level of discussion, which is pleasing because most of you should be at this level of synthesis and discussion. As your industry and life experience puts you at this point, along with the fact that you are where you are in your education. Many of you are close to graduation, and if you're not that close, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think that the quality of your answers has really improved. A few need to add some more substance to your responses in terms of content as well as citations, but generally they are coming along quite well, and I'm pleased. Some of the comments in your video learning journals were very interesting, and admittedly one of the things I'm looking for is whether or not you can reflect the learning of the items that I intended to convey. As an instructor, I'm listening for that feedback to make sure that we have a certain degree of agreement in terms of what I meant for you to learn and what you actually walked away with. So far, so good. Another thing that I'm interested in is knowing what is useful to you as students, and you have provided reactions in the majority of cases as to whether or not you are finding things to be useful. You're comparing and contrasting content from other courses, which I think on the macro level allows me to take a look at the alignment of the curriculum as a whole against the program curricula to say, how are we doing with the big picture? I think the big picture items are going to be most useful for me, but for purposes of our class, these video learning journals are telling me on the micro level what it is that you're learning and what it is that I need to give you more of. Just a reminder about the synchronous interaction checklist. I've noticed that in a lot of your video journals there is room for improvement with regard to the focus of the camera. My dog just bumped my camera, so these things we would try to avoid normally. You want to make sure that if the subject, which is you, is right in the center of the camera, that you reduce the space around the subject so that the focus can be clearly on the subject. You want to make sure that the sound is well set up and tested, and that the lighting is good in the room. Normally I should probably put my dog outside because she's going to make a little bit of noise now. I remembered to turn off both phones, but I forgot to put the dog out. So you can see in action this is a mistake that you should avoid. Do better than I do. With regard to the checklists and worksheets that I added to the site yesterday, I listened to what you were saying about your capstone projects and found a number of resources that I thought would be useful in terms of providing some framework or a suggestion of a framework with regard to your projects. It's sometimes hard to develop things from the ground up without having a model, and at least these checklists and worksheets can provide you with some sort of a framework to begin with, or at least a suggestion of the types of things that you might want to consider when you're gathering information or conducting surveys or putting together learning objectives for your particular learning modules. A word about the dim synchronous discussion that I had scheduled for this week. What I will do with these synchronous discussions is utilize them later on a group project level to practice delivering and critiquing your capstones. I don't think that I have a preference with regard to you working in a group of your choosing, or if I assign groups randomly, it doesn't matter to me. If you have a minute, perhaps you can give me a little feedback on what you prefer. Maybe there are people you've had in class before that you haven't had a chance to work with that you'd like an opportunity to do so. Maybe there are people that you have worked well with in the past and you know that this might be the optimal learning and working environment for you. If those things exist, let me know. If they don't exist, that's okay too. I'll just assign. The notes for weeks 4 and 5 are on the Haiku LMS, and I had intended to deliver these via Udo2. The one week I ended up going to WizIQ because Udo2 was giving me problems, and last week I attempted it again and found out that it needs to be a paid resource for the scale of what I'm trying to accomplish. And I tell you this just because I can't necessarily introduce you to the tool, but the tool was very highly rated. So if you have the budget for your training, you may want to consider this tool. For our purposes, however, I'm trying to do everything without additional cost for the course to show you that there are a number of things you can use that are free. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to come back to U2. I'll give it another go and see what happens. And if we can, we can. If we can't, there are other things that I can use. I think that in general we are rolling along quite well. There are a couple of people who I'm concerned about because you're sort of behind a lot. Remember, keep those lines of communication open. Email, call. I have office hours every Tuesday night from 6 to 8. I'm sitting in front of my computer at your disposal. Skype me, whatever works for you. In any event, thanks for your hard work, and let's roll on.